And now, the survival show that once survived, answering the question, does this rag smell like chloroform to you? In this episode, Justin Carroll swings by. He's going to tell us all about building a swanky bug-out vehicle and living in a van down by the river. And he even convinces a few women to come see the wizard on the side of his sweet, sweet ride. Howdy and welcome into the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 221. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Justin, welcome back to In the Rabbit Hole.
Aaron, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Dude,
this is going to be fun. And this is a topic we've never really gotten into before because I'm going to admit I am not a car guy. And I know a lot of listeners just wanted to take my man card away from me. So if it makes them feel better, I do a lot of shooting to make up for the fact that I'm not a car guy. But bug-out vehicles are a big thing and a huge topic, and you've kind of gotten into this or have fully gotten into this. I'm not really sure which, because as we were joking about a minute ago, I've intentionally made you not tell me anything about this so that we can just have a fun conversation today. So you have a van, and when we say van, are we talking like 70s van with like a wizard painted on the side and shag carpet and mood music on the interior, or what are we talking here?
Yeah, complete with disco ball and wet bar.
Nice.
No, man. So I bought a completely stripped out Sprinter van. It's actually a retired FedEx fleet vehicle. One of the very long, very tall vehicles that I'm sure you see. If you pay attention to them, like anything else, you see a lot more of the Bader-Meinhof effect or whatever. But I see these things absolutely everywhere. And no one really notices them because they just look like utility vans, work vans, whatever. But yeah, man, I got this thing. I don't know that I intended it to be a bug out vehicle per se, but we'll say that it could work for that. So it fits within the parameters of your show here.
So why a van? Like why such focus on mobility?
In 2015, I just kind of ended up in a situation through swapping some vehicles. I had a car that didn't work for me, finally traded it for this van for like super good deal for the age of the van. And this was more of your standard Ford cargo van, just like a regular, relatively new model cargo van. And that kind of coincided with me moving out of the place I had been living. And I had about 6 weeks with nowhere that I had to be. I had a big gap between jobs for my work. And there was one other factor at play. This was mid-June, and my buddy was getting married August 8th in Montana. So I was like, you know what? I've got 6 weeks. I'm going to go on a road trip, and I'm going to end up on August 8th at my buddy's wedding. And ended up seeing about 20 states, spending a lot of time in most of those states that were interesting to me, like Utah, Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Washington, Oregon, Idaho. And in 6 weeks, I mostly camped out in national parks. And during that entire time, I think I spent 3, maybe 4 nights in hotels. And the rest of that was on the road, either sleeping in a tent, in the van, or on the couches of military buddies that were scattered throughout the country. That was just kind of a pivotal experience. I was like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. This is a total once in a lifetime experience. And this is the type of thing that people everywhere I meet who ask me what I'm doing, where I'm from, always say, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have the time to do that. So I got back after the wedding and I was like, you know what? I want to do that again, but I want a van, I want a vehicle, whatever it is that I can actually stand up in and actually have a little bit of space. And that kind of geared me toward the Mercedes Sprinter, which a lot of people that live in vans kind of go for. But no, I don't live in a van. And by the way, if you ever do this, if you ever set up a van as a camper or, a temporary live-in thing or whatever the case, everyone you meet will think they're the first person to ever ask if you live in a van down by the river. And it's something you just kind of have to learn to roll with because everyone thinks they're the most clever person in the world for coming up with that.
Of course.
So just kind of part and parcel of #van life thing, I guess.
So you're actually living the RV lifestyle. You're just not 80 years old.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not fully committed to it yet. So you and I have talked about this. My van is still not quite where I want it to be, but it is kind of livable. I've spent quite a few nights in it. I've done some really long distance road trips in it. Kind of embracing the RV thing with a vehicle that's not so big that I can't take it into cities, that it's not so big that I can't park it in normal parking lots or normal parking spaces. It can totally function as a daily driver if I need it to. Also, wherever I go, I have really a place that I'm really comfortable sleeping in or hanging out in or whatever.
That's pretty neat. So what was the process like? So you go out and you get this stripped van. Where did you begin after that?
Yeah, so this thing was bare metal interior, and because it was FedEx, it had a bulkhead with a sliding door between the cab and the cargo area. So I already, that's one thing that was kind of important to me is when I go to sleep, I wanted to be able to shut the whole thing off. So I didn't have to worry about that. But so it started off with basically applying a layer of rattle trap, which is this really heavy asphalt-based sound deadening material that, if you're familiar with high-end stereo installations and stuff like that, you've probably used it basically just cuts down on vibration of the metal. Insulated it. It took me forever to decide. There's 10 different ways you can skin that cat. You can use fiberglass house insulation. You can use spray foam. You can use really eco-friendly ground up denim insulation. I ended up going with rock wool insulation, which is the slag that comes off of basically melting stone with plasma. And, for a bunch of reasons, it's fireproof, it's mildew resistant, it's really high insulative properties, and it cuts down on sound as well. I also wanted a relatively quiet place. So I threw the sound deadening stuff in, I threw the insulation in, I put up a layer of plastic vapor barrier around the whole thing. That was kind of the groundwork. And unfortunately, nothing is going to work out exactly the way you plan it to, because you basically throw away your square and throw away your level, because nothing in there is ever level and nothing is ever square, because the walls do actually curve as they get toward the top. So everything is has to be custom cut, custom fit. Man, it's from a carpenter's perspective, it's a total nightmare. And I think if I did this again, some things I would choose to just have someone weld for me instead of trying to do everything with wood. Wood is what I know. I worked construction when I was a kid or teenager, and wood is really what I'm comfortable with. So that's what I did with most of the construction. But before you get too far into this, before you get much past that point of just insulating it, you have to have an idea of the floor plan, because that's where some of your basic wiring runs go in. If you're going to plumb your vehicle, if you're planning to have a bathroom, you need to know that before you get too far along in the process, so you can, take the necessary measures there as far as deciding what flooring you want in that area and where drains go and things like that. So insulate, plan your floor plan really well, realizing that it's probably going to change on the fly at some point, and a thing that you have to be prepared to deal with.
Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of ITRH? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting itrh.net. Members get access to episodes a day early, access to monthly virtual and in-person meetups in some areas, an invitation to the secret ITRH Armada Facebook group so you can chat about survival all day long with like-minded people, access to every episode ever produced by ITRH. That's right, all the way back to the beginning, including one that was never aired. And those are just a few things you get with your membership when you sign up and become part of the ITRH Roving Horde by going to itrh.net. Again, that's itrh.net. So you have to do a lot of future-proofing in the design, like they do in commercial buildings, where the expectation is, hey, at some point we are going to have to run new wiring, or things are going to change, or I'm going to want to change things, as opposed to the residential. I was just having this rant with someone before we started recording, where residential, everything is built like you're never going to change it. And to me, it's irritating, but I guess the responsible way or the appropriate way is to consider to future-proof a lot of things in the plans. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So one thing I did do that I haven't had to use it yet, but I'm really glad that I did, is I ran a bunch of conduit like down each side, basically from the front all the way to the back and from the middle all the way to the back. And then I ran a couple pieces of conduit like up over the roof to the other side. So if my electrical plan had changed, like had my floor plan changed so much that I had to change wiring, at least I had a way to do that and still have it concealed and not have it just, I don't know, hot glued to the ceiling or whatever. And like also, I guess kind of a good thing with this is there's not like a ton of open floor space, obviously. So there's pretty much always furniture that you can run your wiring through the back of if you really had to. I kind of wanted things to maybe be a little bit more elegant and I guess kind of protected from, things being dropped on it and whatever. I wanted things a little more sealed up than that, but you still have to kind of future-proof and leave yourself a little bit of access. So who knows? I may add stuff later on. I may change some things kind of significantly, and at least you have the flexibility to do that. And if not, you have to figure out a way to cover that conduit so you don't have to look at it every day.
When you were doing the designs, did you reference other things? So did you reference RVs or did you look at naval architecture? And because you're dealing with such confined spaces, how did you deal with the design considerations and getting design inspiration?
That's a great question. So there's one website, this guy, Van Dog Traveler, he's in the UK, but bought a comparable vehicle. He wrote an ebook called Rusty Van to Cozy Home in 6 months. Basically, this guy is what inspired me. When I was on my road trip, or just shortly before I left, someone pointed this out to me. And I realized right away it wasn't going to happen with the Ford because it's just not big enough. You can't stand up in it. And it's also, there's some structural differences. The Sprinter has really well spaced out supports at even intervals all the way to the, from front to back of the cargo area. So you can affix things in kind of a predictable fashion. So looking at his thing, I bought his ebook, and that was a fair amount of the inspiration. And also it's really good guidance on how to deal with specific issues, even though everything is in metric and to UK standards. But there's a ton of websites. Basically, the first thing I did was just decide what creature comforts I really needed. And a lot of people that do this choose to have a table that they pull outside to be able to cook outside, or there's options for folding couches. That's a couch during the day and it folds out to a bed at night. And just kind of thinking through those things, what was really important to me. And like the couch thing, I didn't want to have to make a bed every night, and I didn't want to have a couch in the middle of the floor that's got rumpled sheets on it all day. So like my bed is built in, it's fixed in place, and that eats up a lot of floor space, unfortunately, but it kind of is what it is. Bathroom. Do you want a bathroom? I really, really did. But that's a thing that I eventually had to say, this is not really going to be feasible or practical at my level of skill. Probably if I built another one, I know a little bit more about what I'm doing now, and I could probably make that work. But also it kind of limits you, right? Like a bathroom, because it has to be, you want it next to your kitchen plumbing if you have a sink. So that's one design constraint. You have to have it in an accessible area. You can't tuck it in a corner where you can't get to it. And also it has to be over an area of the floor where you can drill drains and install gray water tanks and stuff. So that really starts to narrow down your floor plan options really, really quickly. So that's kind of why I decided not to go with that.
How does that work? Because so in RVs and stuff, RVs are generally much larger than the Sprinter vans. How does that work as far as when, I guess the bathroom would have to be pretty damn small.
Yeah, it is. And frequently, so another thing I did before I got the van and even afterward, is I stopped by every RV lot I pass that had Sprinters on it, because there's several companies that make Sprinter RVs or RVs based on like a similar, like the Dodge ProMaster chassis, like very, very similar sized vehicles, and just kind of take a look at, some of the things, like some of the ways they had made everything fit. And I'll be honest, like most of the RV construction seems really like kind of cheap, and I totally over-engineered every single facet of this thing. That's just who I am. But it did give me great floor plan ideas. And typically the way, if you build one of those in there, you're kind of going to be straddling your toilet to take a shower. So just kind of is what it is. If you want a huge bathroom, then it's drastically going to cut down on, or like even a totally separate shower and toilet area. That's a big piece of real estate, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would imagine. So how do you deal with taking showers when you're on the road? Do you just stop off at an hourly motel, or what do you do?
3 words for you: Planet Fitness membership.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That actually, there's been several instances where I've heard people use gym memberships that way. But yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so occasionally I'll take this. I have taken the van on some road trips that are within driving distance from me, on work trips. And I get up in the morning, I go to the gym, I work out, I take a shower, I drive to my job, I teach all day, get back in the van, I go find like somewhere to hike or something to do, go find somewhere to have dinner, and then it works out pretty well, man.
That makes sense. And I guess, and also like most camping, like if you go to a camp area or like what is it, KOA or whatever they're called, like they usually have showers and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I really hate those things because they're typically like just completely denuded of any kind of trees or like pleasant scenery, and it's big RVs, and
yeah.
Also you have to pay for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's another thing I'm trying to avoid through this is save a couple bucks here and there. Hasn't really worked out that way yet.
It's kind of like ammo reloading. Everybody's like, I'm going to save money. And it's like, after you've done spending a few grand. What are the major features? So you don't have a restroom, so to speak, in there. What are the major features of this van?
Okay. I like to cook, and like food is really important to me. That's a huge part of, my day to day is preparing my own food, and a kitchen was a huge thing. So that was kind of an expense, both financially and with space. I have a fairly big countertop, 2-burner gas stove and sink that is one combined unit. And that's probably one of the most expensive single items in the van was that stove. It's this Italian made thing that like sits flush into the countertop and has this really nice plexiglass lid that folds down and cover it. So you basically have a like almost flat work surface through the entire length of the counter when you're not using it. So I have about 3 feet of uninterrupted counter space, and then the stove sink combo, and a fairly large refrigerator, probably comparable to like a dorm room sized fridge. Like you can go super, super small, like much, much smaller with the refrigerators if you want. Obviously, you can go bigger. I guess all that you have space for, and that you're, whatever you're using for power can support that. But kind of hit like a decent middle ground. Bought a refrigerator that's kind of intended for marine applications and intended to run off of solar. So it's like a fairly manageable energy draw. It's fairly efficient and big enough for me to actually like spend one night cooking a bunch of stuff, pack it all up into Tupperware and throw it in the fridge, and I'm good for a couple days. We're kind of moving backward. So if you're standing at the front of the van looking backward, down the left side, you have the kitchen with the countertop, which I also had covered in stainless steel, which I don't know, kind of for aesthetics. And also it's just easy to keep clean and durable and all that. Mm-hmm. There's a floor to ceiling pantry that kind of separates that from the bed area. And my bed is like I sleep horizontally in the van, like basically from left to right in the van, if that makes any sense.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then, which is a little bit of I'm tall enough that I have to sleep diagonally, which kind of works out because my German Shepherd always goes with me, and she hops up, finds her little corner, and I basically just wedge myself in there around that.
I know how that goes with dogs.
Yeah, I can't kick her out. So for the bed, a friend gave me a futon mattress, which just kind of here you can use this until you get a mattress that you actually want. And it actually fits perfectly, and it's really, really comfortable. I don't see myself changing that out anytime soon. And then down the right side, I have a dinette with basically a 2-person seat, a table, which also I had covered in stainless steel, and a one-seater on the other side of that. And then like basically a big closet / storage area. I wanted enough room to hang up my work clothes if I go on a work trip, hang up coats, whatever. And then it also has shelves for socks and t-shirts and that sort of stuff, and as well as a bunch of other storage. The whole under the bed area is storage, and half of that, basically put a wall in the middle of it, so half of it you can access from inside the cab. And then the other half you can only access by opening the back door, so things like spare tire, tools, fluids, that sort of thing. Because the one thing I'm learning with having a vehicle that's kind of home is really beneficial to have a little bit of mechanical knowledge, which I do not have. So if I need something fixed, I invariably end up having to take it into someone else. But I'm kind of trying to learn that. But anyway, that back area under the bed that's only accessible from those rear opening doors is also kind of my secure storage. Even though I put a couple of windows in those doors, you can't open them. I have a padlock on that. On the back door. So even if you break into the front, click the locks, you're not going to get those two back doors open. So I have pretty good confidence that I can put stuff in there and probably no one's going to get into that stuff. The windows were another like big upgrade. Those are a fairly big expense. They're custom made for sprinters by this company called Peninsula Glass out in Washington. They slide open. They have built-in screens. They're like really deeply tinted, just amazing windows. It's really, really nice to be able to open those, and they're right at the level of the bed, so get good airflow in there at night. Solar system, I have solar panels on the roof. I'm sure there's probably 15 other things I'm not thinking of, but that's kind of the rundown.
So how was the process of solar? Because solar is something that it's a topic I've tried to approach a lot. And I always run into a lot of problems with solar, even talking to people who are pretty bright, and solar should be you'd think it'd be pretty easy for them. And they're like, no, it's a big complicated mess. So what was it like for you dealing with solar and trying to power everything and do what you needed to do with this magical van?
I think solar is probably really hard when you're trying to run a home on solar or even supplement on solar. But for a van, there's very limited things I have in there that run electricity. I have a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector, a refrigerator, a tiny amount of electricity that goes to the stove to light it, a fan mounted in the roof, and then a couple outlets that I charge my laptop, my phone, crap like that on. So pretty easy to figure out how much voltage I'm going to use in a day. And then from there, I basically sized my battery bank. This is how many amp hours of power I want to be able to store. Well, basically, this is how much it's going to cost me to run it for a day. Then how many days do I want to be able to go without any sunlight? Let's say I'm in Washington and have 4 days in a row of overcast. How many days do I want to be able to support myself without plugging into something or without any kind of sunlight? And I kind of settled on like somewhere between like 3 and 5 is my comfort zone. Like if I'm somewhere and it's going to be rainy for the next 5 days, that's the beauty of a van. I can pick up and drive somewhere else. And if I can't, I've got 3 to 5 days. I can cut back a little bit on power consumption and probably stretch that out a bit. So figure out what your power draw is, size your battery bank. And then for your panels, you kind of have to look at how much are these going to put back into the system every day under ideal conditions? How much are they going to put back in under maybe less than ideal conditions? So I have 4 100-watt solar panels on the roof, and which I'm like a lot of people go with way smaller systems. But again, like I'm always feel like I have to overdo everything and be like really comfortable with things like that, because I hate the idea of like, should I turn the lights on now or not?
Yeah.
Because I'm really trying to conserve power. Should I turn the refrigerator down so it's not drawing so much? Like I just hate the idea of operating like that. So I kind of went a little bit maybe beyond what I need for the few things I have in there. And like figuring the system out wasn't all that difficult because it's so small, but wiring it up is there's a ton of tutorials on the internet like, oh, it's so easy. You just snap this together, snap that together, plug it into your battery, and boom, you're done. It's a little more involved than that, I would say.
I would imagine. But that's cool. And you brought up how long you could go on the power. In general, as far as zombies are knocking on your door. How long can you be stuck in your van for? Like, as far as the propane and the water and everything else. I mean, obviously, at some point you got to go to the bathroom, and you don't have bathroom in there. But how long can the van kind of sustain itself?
Well, that really depends on propane. If you're starting out full, that'll last a long time. Water is really the Achilles heel, right? Like, it's heavy and it's bulky. So currently I have a 10-gallon freshwater tank for the sink and a 10-gallon gray water tank. And I generally try to keep that supplemented with 5 to 10 gallons of gallon jugs of water. So really that's going to be my huge limiting factor. If I had to hole up in there, it wouldn't be fun, but I could probably hunker down in there for a week.
I gotcha. Okay. So, and you brought up weight. Man, I would imagine weight is a big concern with this project, sort of like the same it would be with a boat, but for slightly different reasons. How did you deal with the weight concerns of everything you were building and what went in and what didn't go in? Or was it an issue at all? Where you're just like, nah, I didn't even think about it.
Well, it wasn't really an issue, because I'm not going to quote a number on the air because I'm certain I will get it dead wrong, but it is a cargo van. It's meant to carry like fairly large amounts of weight, and it's actually sized to be able to fit, I think, 3 pallets in it.
Oh, wow.
With the wheelbase, mine has 158-inch wheelbase. So it's already designed to carry a pretty considerable amount of weight. And I've done some like really rough estimating, and even so, I'm not even close to the load carrying. And you want to talk about weight, man, batteries.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. That's several hundred pounds right there, but I'm not going to quit. It's several thousand pounds. I can put in the van comfortably.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I was just curious, like, did it go into consideration, one, what the van could handle, and two, when considering gas mileage and the range that your van could go between fill-ups?
So I have seen a little bit of a hit in gas mileage. So when I first got it, like very basic things, and it just basically had the insulation in, had all the paneling up on the walls. But before I had furniture, I was getting, and a lot of people are really surprised, I was getting around 26 miles per gallon.
Oh, wow.
So I have an older Sprinter. There's basically 2 body styles. There's the 2002 to 2006, which is the T1N, which is known for being like the vehicle itself is much lighter weight and the engine is more efficient. It's a 5-cylinder diesel. The 2007 and on, the NC3 model are a little heavier. They get a little bit worse fuel mileage, but they're also bigger. They're also, I think you'd have about a foot more real estate. Well, in length, they're about a foot longer. Unfortunately, like that wasn't the one that came along for me, but I'm happy with the T1N. Still, I'm probably getting 24 miles to the gallon, and like with interstate driving, have over 500 miles of range right now. So I'm not super worried about that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And I meant to ask that earlier. Did you go diesel or gas or gasoline?
Diesel.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. These are only available with diesel engine. And if you're looking for these, the Sprinter was imported. They're all made by Mercedes. It's all 100% Mercedes vehicle.
That's what I always assumed. Yeah.
Yeah. For the first few years that they were imported, they were actually badged as Dodges and Freightliners. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of Dodge Sprinters or Freightliner Sprinters on the road. That was basically just an import skirting maneuver to save some money on the importation tax. But yeah, they're all pretty standard packages with the 2. Somebody's going to send you an angry email about how I'm wrong with this, but 2.7 liter diesel, 2.5 liter diesel.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe there is a gasoline Sprinter.
Okay. I get that makes sense given what they're designed to do and the ranges and everything else. And I guess the use that someone would get out of them in a day. So I guess diesel actually makes more sense than gas from the limited understanding of vehicles that I do have. How long is this whole process taking you? Because you've done a lot of stuff here. I mean, this is a lot of work. How long is this taking you?
Well, I bought the van in late 2015, and it's it's still not finished. So
Yeah.
it's like I also work and I have a bunch of other hobbies, and I'm very ADD. So I go through big phases of doing a lot of work on the van, and then not really being motivated to work on it all that much. And then I circle back around to it. So this has kind of been one of those on again, off again projects that sometimes it's really hard to find the motivation. Like some stuff is easy, like throwing insulation up. That went really fast, so you don't have to think about it much. But once you get into the more technical projects that require you to really think about, like, is this really where I want to drill this hole? Am I hooking this up correctly? Let's measure that again. It takes a lot longer. It's a lot more mentally taxing. And I found that, like, usually I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to step away from this for a while, come back to it later on, because I'm not really in a good headspace, and I'm going to mess something up if I keep going at this point.
Okay. What does this ended up costing you roughly? If somebody wanted to go out and get into this tomorrow and they're like, that what Justin's doing sounds cool, what did this run you?
Yeah. So the van, I had like this huge ambition for the van, but at the same time, I was like, this could easily turn into everything else I do. I'm really into it for a while, and then I completely lose interest and just don't want to.
I know how
just
that
want
goes,
to push this thing off a cliff and not think about it any longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely didn't want to buy a brand new van, just insanely expensive. Although in 2016 they did start importing the 4x4 Sprinters to the US, which maybe if I do another one, that might be an option. But I paid about $7,000 for the van itself, which T1N, like you're not going to find many of those that are super low mileage just because they haven't been made since 2006. About $7,000 for the van, and I'd say I probably at this point right now have close to I'm going to say somewhere between like $12,000 and $15,000 in it.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, in solar panels and windows and stoves and lumber and insulation, and like all these little things add up just unbelievably fast when you're making a $75 trip to Lowe's twice every Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Financially, what's the difference between, or what are the considerations when you're thinking doing this yourself versus buying one already made? Because I've seen some of these Sprinters already done, and they're pretty sexy, but I don't think I've seen a price tag on them yet. And I think I've intentionally not looked at the price tag because I didn't want to know. But take us there. What are we talking about financially? Like the advantages, disadvantages, DIY versus like just buy it and driving it off the lot.
Financially, that is the big difference. And depending, like there's anything else, there's a range, right? Anything you're talking about, there's like the low end models and then like super high end stuff. But man, you can really, really easily drop 80 to 100 grand and up on a new Sprinter produced by an RV company and titled as an RV. And I mean, even buying a base model Sprinter, you're looking at 50, 60 grand, and that's with nothing in it. That's just a cargo van.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
They tend to have a lot flashier features like TVs with swing arms that pull out from the wall and microwaves and whatever. The disadvantages of those for me, though, I mean, financially, it's a disadvantage. I don't want to pay that much money for an RV that I may or may not like. The other disadvantages are you always have to be plugged into shore power to use one of those. They're not set up for solar, and like all the amenities that they have in them wouldn't run off of a solar system. You would have to really scale some stuff back. So I definitely didn't want to buy something that had a bunch of features that I wouldn't use or that would be like just prohibitive to my electrical system. That was kind of a big reason. Another thing is it allows you to kind of customize it to things that are important to you. I tend to not like the factory produced RV Sprinters because most of them are just like it's a solid wall of glass all the way down on all four sides. Which I didn't want, kind of as a security thing. I didn't want the whole thing to be windows everywhere. I also didn't want this thing to be windows everywhere, just because heat becomes much more difficult to manage in the summer with all that passive solar. It might be great in the winter, but in the summertime it's rough. And then the other piece of it is I didn't want my van to look like an RV. I didn't want people to say like, oh, that dude's going camping, because I'm obviously driving an RV. The windows in my van look a little different than factory windows, but I only have 2. They're on the back doors, and they don't look so different. My van doesn't stand out instantly as this is an RV. It looks like an old work truck. So that was kind of another consideration for me. I didn't want to overtly look like an RV, because, one of the benefits of driving a vehicle with a bed in it is when you get tired, you can stop and take a nap. And I didn't want to be the guy in the whatever parking lot that's obviously spending the night in his RV. That stealth camping, there's a bunch of websites that deal with stealth camping. There's people that do this in all kinds of vehicles, and Walmart parking lots, pretty much every Walmart in the country. I say pretty much because some explicitly do not, but most Walmarts in the country, you can spend the night in the parking lot. Most Cabela's, Bass Pro Shops, things of that nature. Hotels, I have really good luck at. Just pull into closest Hilton Garden Inn, squeeze yourself between 2 cars, and go to sleep. Obviously, I'm not going to sit out there and cook a meal and put my music on and pull out the Christmas lights and all that. But yeah, you can get pretty creative with that, which obviously tends to look a little sketchy. People that aren't into this kind of lifestyle don't really like to acknowledge that stuff all that much, but a lot of people are out there doing it. I was really surprised, man. On my road trip, I did have to spend a few nights in the van. It was raining or whatever, or I was in the middle, like between 2 places, and needed to stop for the night. And you'd pull into a Walmart, there'd be 200 cars in the parking lot. You'd wake up the next morning and the same 3 vehicles that were around you last night are still there in the morning. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person doing this. That's pretty much been my experience at every Walmart I've stayed at, which I kind of try to avoid Walmarts for a number of reasons, but they do have a couple benefits. They're everywhere. I think there's like 12,000 Walmarts in the world, and most of them are open 24 hours a day. So if you got that biological clock, pretty much 6 o'clock in the morning, I need to poop, and those doors are always open.
Yeah, I've heard that Walmart, I didn't know that about like Cabela's and Bass Pro, but that Walmarts were very welcoming. Most Walmarts were very welcoming to RVs and stuff like that. We're just like, yeah. And it makes sense from a business standpoint. Like, they have huge parking lots, and most people aren't going to be there for like several days on end. But they're certainly going to spend money at that Walmart, most likely, while they're there. So it makes sense. And Jonathan and Jason and I all have a running joke about like, we seem to not be able to go camping without at some point having to make a Walmart run. I think now it's just become tradition, like whether we need to or not, we just do it. But yeah, that's interesting. How do you deal with hot and cold? So I'm fairly temperature sensitive person. So being hot or cold to me is usually a pretty big deal. I mean, I can tolerate a lot, but I don't want to have to. How do you deal with that?
I can handle heat pretty well. I don't love the cold. I definitely did not want to be cold. So initially I'd planned to put a propane furnace in, and they also make, like Sprinter makes diesel powered furnaces that mount under the passenger seat that you hook into your fuel tank that basically blows hot air. Like, you can run that when the vehicle's not running to heat the cargo compartment. Huh. But those things cost an insane amount of money. First of all, the diesel ones are just incredibly expensive. And they also make your vehicle smell like diesel, which I didn't really want. So
yeah, no.
I kind of ended up taking a shortcut on that and buying a Mr. Heater buddy heater that's propane powered. It runs off the little green propane bottles. And if I've stayed in the van when it's about 30 degrees out, and like, that's kind of my threshold. I can heat the van up like really well before I go to bed basically naked, and be just fine, and wake up in the morning, get dressed, turn the thing back on it. And it's really not that bad. I really don't have an issue with that. But I have found that once you dip into the 20s, like that's time to that's time to go back home and sleep in the house or get a hotel room, or it's just it just like past the point of comfort for me. But that's pretty much what I do. I'll run the heater for an hour before I go to bed, get it nice and warm in there, and then it cools off through the night. And basically, you're just managing that with blankets and bedding, right? Summertime, for hot and cold, I have the windows that open in the back. I have the fantastic vent on the roof. So, and I put, well, actually, that was in it when I bought the van. I think the guy that I bought the van from had ideas about doing this and then decided not to because he had actually cut the hole, put the fan in, and it wasn't hooked up to anything. But that gives me a nice airflow from the back of the van all the way to the front of the van, which doesn't do everything for me. Like if it's rainy, I can have that vent open, but I can't have the windows open. So, which I haven't really run into all that much yet. I haven't been anywhere where it's super hot that I need the windows open and it's pouring rain out for days yet. I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But again, kind of the beauty of the van, if it, depending on your situation and what you're using this for, if it's super hot, drive somewhere else where it's not.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. That is a nice part about being having a house on wheels. So, okay, here's the thing: you're in town and you're hanging out with a buddy or whatever, and his buddy's girlfriend introduced you to another girl, and it's like, hey, we should continue this somewhere else. Do you invite them back to your van, or how does that work? Because you're still a fairly young guy out and about on town and stuff. And we won't get too deep into the details of this, but how is that reaction as far as the single life goes?
Well, I'm less single than I used to be, but here's what I'll say on that is just like any other person you're talking to, that's not what I open with. Hi, I'm Justin and I live in a van. And same token, you probably don't want to wait till the last second to be like, oh yeah, my place that I've been talking about going to is that van that's sitting over there in the parking lot. You probably want to work that, but like choose your appropriate moment to work that into the conversation.
That makes sense. And I'm sure you put some spin on it.
Honestly, I've been surprised at how many people, like basically, I'm a little self-conscious about this sometimes around certain people. Like I hate to jump to like, yeah, I'm a weirdo that lives in a van. So typically I lead a little bit more with the travel. I travel around. I see all these places that are on my bucket list or, however you want to put that. I visit my military friends that are all around the country and, I got this van to do it in. And people are almost universally like, dude, that is awesome. I wish I could do something like this. And I've talked one of my close friends. Well, I didn't have to talk him into it all that much. He saw mine and he's like, dude, we want to do this. So I think they're about this close to selling their house and buying an RV Sprinter and setting out on the road.
That makes sense. And I guess that when you put it that way, it's more, or I should say it's less, hey, does this smell like chloroform versus more freedom and travel the country and see things and do things. And it's fun and exciting.
Yeah, it's all about salesmanship.
Exactly. It's not, yeah. Hey, does this rag smell like chloroform? Yeah.
Visit from the Ether Bunny.
Yeah, well, very cool. So what does the future hold? You said you're not done with this yet. What are your next projects that you're doing with this? Where are you going with it?
So I still have to button this whole thing up. Like a lot of the wood and it's still unfinished. I still have not gotten backsplash up around the tile. I still don't have doors on a lot of the cabinets. And that's kind of one of those fine carpentry things that I'm really dreading taking on because obviously you want all those to function correctly and open smoothly and that sort of thing. This will never be a finished product. There will probably never be a time where I'm like, I'm done. I don't have to worry about anything else. It's, even things that I've already done that are kind of quote unquote completed or like sometimes require a little bit of modification or tweaking or tuning or that sort of thing. So man, as far as when I'm finished, I really couldn't tell you. I really couldn't give you a solid estimate, but I mean, probably never be totally completed to my satisfaction.
What was the hardest part about doing this? Like which thing gave you the most aggravation? And if somebody else was looking at doing this, you would say like, look, this is the thing you need to really put more time and energy and realize is going to be more difficult than you thought it was.
I guess if I had to give one piece of advice for this, it would be on any stage of this, don't be afraid to pull things back out and start over. So I kind of have this mindset of wanting to hit milestones, wanting to hit checkpoints of, oh, this is done. We can put this in the bag, move on to the next thing. Or, oh, let's go ahead and get this in so we can get this paneling on so it looks finished and we can admire how awesome it looks. And there are several things in the van that really, really bug me now because I wish I would have taken the time to pull it back off, cut it again, and make it fit a little better, or, align those joints just a little bit better so they fit a little more smoothly and they were actually square instead of almost square. Because, man, you're basically building a foundation all the way around with this thing. And if any little thing is off, you're going to run in, it's just going to push those problems further down the road. They're going to become bigger and bigger problems. If there's one thing I could say, it would be, don't be afraid to undo anything and redo it. Take the time now. You'll definitely thank yourself later. And there's, like I say, man, there's a few things in there that if I built another van, I would not be afraid to say, you know what, this isn't good enough. Let's just pull it out and do it over again.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Because I know a lot of people would actually just try to bull their way through things. And that makes sense. If you have a problem and it becomes systemic, and I would imagine actually does start to become a compounding problem if you don't address it right away. That makes good sense. So Justin, this is pretty cool. And as you said, this is an ongoing project. You're thinking it's never going to end. I feel the same way about my reloading project right now. Do you have a website for this? Are you blogging about it? Are you like, hey babe, I'm a travel blogger. How do people keep up with your van shenanigans?
You can check me out on vanofaction.com. That's all one word, vanofaction.com. Fairly simple blog, but you'll be able to see photographs of it, see where it's at, and see some of the steps that it took to get where it's at.
Very cool. And I got to say, one of the coolest domain names I've heard yet.
Well, it's my girlfriend's idea. I totally cannot take credit for it, but I'm sure she thanks you. She's a big fan.
Awesome. Well, Justin, as always, dude, it is so cool to have you on. We have so many interesting conversations about so much random stuff on air and off air, of course. So I look forward to the next time.
Me too, Aaron.
Show notes, links to Justin, and other resources can be found at intherabbithole.com/E221. Get more survival goodness and help support the show. Visit itrh.net to become part of the Roving Horde Armada. It's members just like you that really do help keep the lights on. Again, visit itrh.net. That wraps up episode number 221 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.